When man was banished from the Garden of Eden, he received the dread sentence that the ground should be cursed for his sake, and that in sorrow should he eat of it all the days of his life. We are all aware that this language, however true in its general application, is not to be understood in a literal and exclusive sense. Man was told that the earth should bring forth thorns and thistles, but it also produces flowers to delight and fruits to nourish him. The infinite being has said that the days of our life shall be marked with sorrow, and they are. But the afflictions to which we are subject are attended with blessed antidotes. Moral sources of enjoyment are given us, as fruits and flowers for the soul, and the teachings of interest, as well as the impulses of gratitude, should lead us to consider with attention those gifts which enlarge the capacities of the spirit and call forth the affections of the heart. And such a gift is poetry. If it be asked, what is poetry? We must confess ourselves unable to afford a minute definition, for, like the unearthly visitants which the fears of superstition have occasionally summoned to the world, she fascinates the senses, but eludes the grasp of the beholder, and stands before him, visible, powerful, yet impalpable. The various occupations and pursuits of life may be explained with clearness and accuracy, for they have been created and divided by man. But poetry is above and not of man, and he cannot, by any array of words, set forth its subtlety, its peculiarities, its perfection, its loveliness, and its universal power. Can the painter place the arched rainbow, or the glittering dewdrop on the canvas? Can the sculptor invest his image with a soul? Can the sympathies that mysteriously connect us, the unfledged thoughts that rush tumultuously through the brain, be subjected to the process of analysis and the power of demonstration? It seems equally impossible to define poetry. We may pile word upon word and sentence upon sentence to attain the object, but the result of our labors, like that of the builders of the Tower of Babel, will be discomfiture and confusion, and poetry will still exist, defying the power of language and soaring above the reach of description. It may naturally be inquired then, cannot poetry be defined? Do we know of what we speak when we allude to it? We do. For many of its definitions to a certain extent are correct. They tell us what poetry is, in a peculiar aspect, but fail to give us sufficiently comprehensive views. We may safely assume the position that poetry always addresses itself either to the imagination, or the feelings, or to both. The word poet is derived from the Greek poien, I create, and its etymological signification is therefore, the creator. Shakespeare has adopted this meaning in his Midsummer Night's Dream. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. And as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes, and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. But even the definition of Shakespeare falls far short of conveying to the mind a complete idea of the poet. Indeed, the inventor of unnatural or supernatural characters, the poet of ghosts, witches, and fairies, is neither the most useful nor the most fascinating of his class. The poet of nature stands preeminent, not the one who bodies forth the forms of things unknown, but he who takes known and familiar subjects and presents them to the eye with such beauty, delicacy, and force that we view them in a new light and connect them with delightful associations. It is the province of poetry, by some beautiful thought, some apt comparison, some fine illustration, some well-woven fiction, or eloquent exclamation, to fix on the memory the subject of which she speaks. And if it be one connected with the cause of truth, if it be a correct sentiment, or a moral or religious precept, poetry makes it sink deeper into the heart and take a stronger hold on the feelings. Thus, we have often heard that it is right to love our enemies, but the bard adds, like a sandal tree that sheds perfume on the axe that fells it. It is not our intention to speak particularly of the conventional classifications and divisions of poetry, but merely to offer a few general remarks on the subject, intended in some slight degree to set forth its value and its interest. Its mechanical part is a useful subject for the poet himself, but it is only a medium, and not a necessary one, for the conveyance of ideas, since poetry may be expressed in what is called prose, and its peculiar eloquence need not of necessity be communicated to the world in accordance with the rules of versification. 'Tis not the chime and flow of words that move in measured file and metrical array, 'tis not the union of returning sounds, nor all the pleasing artifice of rhyme, and quantity and accent that can give this all-pervading spirit to the ear, or blend it with the movings of the soul, 'Tis a mysterious feeling which combines man with the world around him in a chain woven of flowers. But although poetry is not unavoidably dependent upon arbitrary rules, it is not to be denied that it is verse in its general acceptation, and it is perfectly natural that it should be. The laws which govern poetry are evidently useful in their operation. They tend to preserve a general harmony of expression, which is itself a part of poetry, for those passages in prose works which are classed with the productions of the muse certainly possess this melodious flow, and to the position assumed with regard to the meaning of poetry we may add that it is connected with harmony of expression. Here then, we see the utility of the restrictions by which the poet chooses to be bound and perceive that the laws of poetry facilitate its composition and maintain its distinctiveness. If a writer's ear be so delicate and accurate that he can pen his sentences with the same harmony which the rules of versification tend to produce, the absence of the arbitrary divisions and accentuations would not prevent his compositions from deserving the name of poetry. But this has been seldom attempted, as there are very few who do not find the laws of meter convenient. All those most distinguished as poets have written in verse, and although poetry may occasionally appear without its distinctive peculiarities, the utility of these mechanical arrangements will be seen at a glance. There is a mysterious relationship between poetry and music. There is melody in the reading of poetry, and the feelings aroused by the breathings of music are kindred to those which poetry excites. And when they unite their peculiar attractions, the combined spell opens a new source of enchantment, enthralling alike the senses and the soul. But poetry may well hold a higher place in our estimation than music. Unlike the latter, it can distinctly relate the facts of history and the fancies of fiction, and can summon to our view figures and scenes with a truth and vividness defying the skill of the limner. The faculty of composing poetry is a gift peculiar to a few, but the power of appreciating it is open to all. We can all love and admire it because it addresses the common feelings of humanity. Its spirit is universal. It can affect, arouse, inspire, delight, and improve us all. However powerful the influence of education, it can never make a poet. We may feel the want of one, and look anxiously for the appearance of some Homer, or Shakespeare, or Milton, but no means within the power of man can bring him forth if the spirit is wanting, and perhaps at the same time independent of factitious aid, and ignorant of those who are willing to exert it. A poet may arise to wake and warm the world, and exist in the sympathies and affections of its inhabitants, as long as that world shall last. Poetry is emphatically a gift, but as we have already remarked, it is not for an initiated few only to receive the advantages to be derived from it. Like the source of light, it may be a wonder and a mystery, but it is made for all mankind, and sends its rays alike on palace couch and cottage BD. It may rouse the admiration and the sympathy of the learned and the unlearned, the rich and the poor, and of all those who have the common feelings, passions, and desires of humanity. It is chiefly to this universal power of poetry that we shall call the reader's attention in this essay, a power that lives through all life, extends through all extent, spreads undivided, operates unspent. We know there are many who, influenced by some prejudice or ignorant of their own capabilities of enjoyment, will think and perhaps say that poetry has no charms for them, and who, guided by the operation of an ill-formed opinion, studiously close their eyes to its fascinating and permanent attractions. We ask but of such that before they finally abjure poetry, they place themselves in a situation to feel its influence. They would not fail soon to acknowledge that they had despised only because they had neglected it. They would exclaim, with a voice of exultation, "We have discovered an ever-living fountain of crystal waters where angels might wash and be purer." Whatever may be our situation in life, we may all be benefited by encouraging an attachment to poetry. It opens to us new sources of pleasure and enjoyment, not such as can only be purchased by immense wealth and severe application, but such as are available to the humblest and the poorest. It finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. In truth, the world is full of poetry, the air is living with its spirit, and the waves dance to the music of its melodies and sparkle in its brightness. Earth is veiled and mantled with its beauty. There is an objection to poetry very generally prevalent which debars many from a participation in its pure and elevated enjoyments. Poetry, it is often said, is not practical. And here let ens observe that this word practical is too often used in a limited sense and represents only that which, at very first view, is palpably and incontrovertibly useful. Indeed, to go farther, it is sometimes enigmas fatuous, and means merely an array of figures or a collection of facts without any very minute reference to the demonstrative character of the figures, or the conclusive tendency of the facts. A practical man of this latter class, to use Bulwer's language, hates both poets and philosophers. He has a great love for facts. If you could speak to him out of the multiplication table, he would think you a great orator. Alas, for such practical men, they confine themselves within a narrow circle and look upon all beyond as idleness and folly. They do not pause to view the ultimate results of things. They do not see the softening, the refining, the exalting effects of poetry. They do not perceive its influence on national character and its connection with morals and religion. They only look to the facts that it does not tell them how to keep accounts, to buy, to sell, to manufacture, nor to speculate, that it is not always profitable as a trade, and that it does not add to one's reputation on change, and thus they come to the conclusion that it is undeserving of encouragement. Such men are willing to drag all who are above them down to their own level, to make the whole world one great arena of selfishness, to root with barbarous hand from our pathway every fruit and flower, and leave nothing but thorns and thistles behind. There is too much intellect in the world for the general success of such narrow views of utility, and the human mind is not always nor everywhere to be bound by fetters that disgrace and pollute it. Neil, in the commencement of his lectures on English poetry, says, "In introducing poetry to your notice, I am constrained to confess that it is a mere superfluity and ornament. With all deference, we must question the truth of the poet's remark. Indeed, in the course of a few succeeding lines he himself contradicts his previous confession, and observes that there is a mental appetite, which is as necessary to satisfy as the corporeal one. There are maladies of the mind which are even more destructive than those of the body, and which, as the sound of the sweet harp of David drove the demon out of Saul, have been known to yield to the soothing influence of poetry. Nations the most illustrious in arts and arms have also been the most celebrated for their cultivation of letters, and when the monuments of those arts and the achievements of those arms have passed away from the face of the earth, they have transmitted their fame to the remotest ages through the medium of literature alone. The canvas fritters into shreds, and the column molders into ruin. The voice of music is mute, and the beautiful expression of sculpture is a blank and a gloomy void. The right hand of the mechanist forgets its cunning, and the arm of the warrior becomes powerless in the grave. But the lyre of the poet still vibrates. Ages listen to his song and honor it, and while the pencil of Apelles, and the chisel of Phidias, and the sword of Caesar, and the engine of Archimedes live only in the breath of tradition, or on the page of history, or in some perishable and imperfect fragment, the pen of Homer, of Virgil, or of Shakespeare is an instrument of power as mighty and magical as when first the gifted finger of the poet grasped it. Is poetry, then, the sweet comforter of the mind diseased, the electric chain wherewith ages past, present, and future are bound, the mighty and magical power swaying the hearts and molding the actions of men, a mere superfluity and ornament? No, it is not. And the young poet who made the assertion undervalued the gift of which he was a possessor, and we conceive that no full and correct exposition can be made of the benefits of poetry without treating it as practical in its final tendencies. England is the only powerful nation with whom we have ever been at war. A little more than half a century since we were placed in that peculiar relation toward her, which is calculated of all others to beget feelings of deadly hostility, and the people of both countries naturally fostered sentiments of aversion to each other and magnified all attributed political vices and national defects. Not a quarter of a century has passed away since a war of several years' duration was waged with Great Britain, when old feelings of hatred were revived, and from the smoldering ashes of past dissensions a new flame was kindled that made the hearts of the American people burn with indignation and caused them to speak with additional severity of the nation which had so recently given them fresh grounds for enmity. Other causes of dispute and discussion have arisen between the two countries, but notwithstanding all these reasons for mutual ill-feeling, we may safely say that in the affairs of no nation do the people of the United States take a deeper or a kindlier interest than in those of Great Britain, and that toward no people do they entertain more friendly and respectful sentiments. The impression made on the American people by the English poets will never be effaced. It preserved its influence in the stormiest days of the revolution. It had a still small voice, even amid the din of battle. It now aids in preserving those amicable relations between the two countries, which are a present source of satisfaction to both, and if not weakened by some new and unexpected subject of angry controversy, will continue to brighten and strengthen the bands of an honorable friendship. Above all poets who have contributed to make this impression, Shakespeare stands preeminent. His works are known and admired by all classes in both countries, and his potent influence has molded their feelings and swayed their minds. The words of Sprague in his fine ode to the deathless bard of Avon are those of truth and soberness. Our Roman-hearted fathers broke thy parent empire's galling yoke, but thou, harmonious monarch of the mind, around their sons a gentle chain shall bind. Once more in thee shall Albion's scepter wave, and what her mighty lion lost, her mightier swan shall save. After a long and fearful lethargy, the spirit of liberty in Greece exhibited signs of reanimation, and the glad tidings sent a thrill of joy to every lover of free institutions. We knew that the Greeks had degenerated, we were acquainted with their faults and their vices, but Greece was the land of Homer. The tones of his lyre still breathed in our ears. He had written as with a diamond the glory and the greatness of Greece upon our hearts. He had shown to us her trials and her fortitude. He had exhibited her heroes and her statesmen. He had sung of her battles and her victories. We sympathized with her in her misfortunes. We rejoiced in her prosperity. And when degenerate and disgraced, but not despairing, Greece lifted up her hands for succor, when the voice of her lamentation came mournfully over the Atlantic waves, we could not find it in our hearts to resist its power, and were led to relieve the unfortunate, not only by that present misery which we saw, but also by that past greatness which her poets had revealed to us. The enthusiasm which was excited some years since, in behalf of unfortunate oppressed Poland, was nonetheless ardent for the sympathy excited by Campbell. He had written of the wrongs of that injured nation, of the bravery of her people, and of the devoted courage of her favorite warrior. He had summoned before our mind's eye that last scene in which the soldier acted when hope for a season bade the world farewell, and freedom shrieked as Kosciuszko fell. We saw the energies of Poland prostrated by the ruthless vengeance of the autocrat. We saw, on Prague's proud arch the fires of ruin glow, his blood-dyed waters murmuring far below. Hark, as the smoldering piles with thunder fall, 1,000 shrieks for hopeless mercy call. Earth shook, red meteors flashed along the sky, and conscious nature shuddered at the cry. Poland became still more endeared to us by the eloquence of the poet, and when she again determined to resist the rod of the oppressor, our hearts and our prayers were with her, and we proved our good wishes in a more substantial manner than by mere expressions of sympathy. Few attachments are so strong that they cannot be increased, and poetry seems to make more powerful the beatings of a patriotic heart, and the aspirations of a patriotic mind. Forever wave that standard sheet, where breathes the foe but falls before us, with freedom's soil beneath our feet, and freedom's banner streaming o'er us. This allusion to our national song reminds us that there is a wide field in which the American poet may employ himself, much to the increase of his own fame, and the good of his country. We want more national songs. Casual observers cannot appreciate their importance. They give a tone to the feelings of a nation. They unite the hearts of a people. And by creating a harmonious pulsation of patriotic fervor, they oppose a barrier to the inroads of discord and disunion. We should have songs to cheer the heart of the mariner on the bosom of the perilous ocean, songs for the farmer and the mechanic, songs for the country and the town, all as far as practicable containing some appropriate sentiment, all directing our attachments to our common country, all strictly and truly American, and we should have one proud song suited to all, one national anthem that, like the Marseille hymn of France or the Ranz de Vache of Switzerland, should be dear to the bosom of every age, sex and condition, that should be lisped by infancy, sung by budding youth and vigorous manhood, and repeated in the tremulous accents of old age. A song that, like the war torch of Scotland, which is carried with enthusiasm from clan to clan, should be handed down from generation to generation, the song of songs of the American people. But aside from patriotic songs, there are many which confirm our love for domestic life and virtuous conduct. A moral aphorism, which when prosaically stated might be considered merely as a dull saw, may, when skillfully woven in a popular song, prove a powerful auxiliary to the cause of truth. Poetry can adapt herself to all ages. She can weave a simple ballad for childhood, or a fervent song for the youth ripening into manhood. She has her pictures of fireside happiness and domestic comfort for the parent, and her voice has a tone for the ear of the aged. She can adapt herself to all conditions. She has her simple and affecting narratives for the poor and the humble. She has a trumpet voice for the soldier and the statesman, and a most refined speech for the scholar. She will be our companion at all times and in all seasons. She will give an additional zest to prosperity, and when the season of adversity shall arrive, she will comfort the wounded spirit and bind up the broken heart. Miriam and Moses, the first authors, were poets, and their song of thanksgiving on passing the Red Sea has been styled at once the most ancient monument and a masterpiece of poetic composition. And before the invention of letters, the religion, the laws, and the history of the different nations were handed down to posterity through the medium of poetry. Sculpture and painting are the fruits of long experience and unwearied care, and they have been gradually improved from the rudest imitations of nature to their present state. But poetry dates her mortal existence with the birth of mankind, and although the poet may employ his gift for unworthy purposes, it is still an emanation from the deity. As sunshine broken by the rill, though turned astray, is sunshine still. And the most groundless and anomalous objections urged against poetry are those that proceed from religious men. One great objection on the part of such men is the perversion of poetry to improper uses. As well might they tell the patriot not to draw the sword in behalf of his country, because it is the weapon of the oppressor. As well might they cast away the book of life, because its meaning is distorted by fools and fanatics. Poetry is most grand when connected with religious subjects, and in her purest and most sublime personification, she does not, like Ajax, defy the lightning and the God who made it, but like the ethereal beings around the throne of heaven, she veils her burning eyes with her resplendent wings when in the solemn presence of the Almighty. He who has no love for poetry may lay to heart the precepts of the Bible, but there is a light upon the pages of that book which he sees not. There is a harmony in its language which he hears not, for there is a vein of poetry, pure, simple, and sublime, running through the whole sacred volume. No Christian will pretend to doubt that the language of the Bible is the very language best calculated to answer the purpose for which it is intended. Neither will any Christian deny that it is intended for the perusal of man in all ages, countries, and conditions, and if the language of this book is poetry, it naturally follows that the most useful instructions and sublime truths should really exert the greatest influence on mankind when communicated to the world through this fascinating medium. We meet with poetry on the very threshold of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. How simple and how significant, how appropriate yet how poetical. How well is the language adapted to describe the operations of a supreme being. No perplexing reflections, no obstacles. He spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We not only find poetry in the abstract in the scriptures, but it has been maintained that a portion of the contents of that volume are written in accordance with certain rules of composition, approximating in some degree to those which govern poetry in its most exclusive sense. Parallelism, says Louth, is a certain equality, resemblance, or relationship between the members of each period, so that in one or more lines or members of the same period, things shall answer to things, and words to words, as if fitted to each other, by a kind of rule or measure. The following are examples of parallel couplets, which have been quoted from the Old and New Testaments. "Seek ye Jehovah while he may be found, call upon him while he is near. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea, his chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Saviour. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments, and abide in his love. I planted, Apollos watered, but God made to grow, so that neither he who planteth is anything, nor he that watereth, but God who maketh to grow." Are tenderness or sublimity or simplicity of expression elements of poetry? They are all in the Bible. Does poetry imply the invention of fictions? Look at the parables. Must it embrace comparisons and figures? Behold them in the book of books. Take any of its attempted definitions and they will all correspond with portions of the sacred volume. In the New Testament, we not only find poetry in its instructions, its descriptions, its parables, and its prophecies, but there is a majesty, a beauty, and an intellectuality in the action, embodying some of the finest elements of poetry. In the Old Dispensation, we read more of the frailties and the vices of men, but in the Gospel we become acquainted with the perfect character and sublime conduct of Christ. A mediator is sent to reform, to save the world. Had he appeared in all the paraphernalia of earthly pomp and regal splendor? Had he descended as a conqueror with his marshaled host and glittering array? The passing vanities of earth might have seemed invested with a more sacred character. But he came not thus. He was born in a manger and died on the cross. He took advantage of no elevated situation in life, but poor, persecuted, and oppressed, he exhibited in stronger relief the grandeur of the soul and the uses of adversity. Apart even from his divine character, the history of his life makes a deep impression upon the poetic mind, an impression so deep that it wrung from the infidel Rousseau the celebrated expression, when alluding to the moral sublimity attending the last hours of Christ, he exclaims, "Socrates died like a philosopher, but Jesus Christ like a god." Take from us the belief in a future existence, and poetry is shorn of her beams, but let her discuss those subjects connected with our immortal destiny, and she assumes an appearance of inexpressible glory. She strips us for a time of our earthly garments, that we may follow her to the pure river of life, and like the repentant tear, which the Peri conveyed to the angel, removes the crystal bar which binds the gates of paradise. Poetry is the appropriate handmaid of religion, and says Wolfe, the homage of Voltaire to the Muse's piety remains a bright memorial of her allegiance to Christianity. When the powers of hell seemed for a time to prevail, and his principles had given a shock to the faith of Europe, the daring blasphemer ventured to approach the dramatic muse, but no inspiration would she vouchsafe to dignify the sentiments of impiety and atheism. He found that no impassioned emotion could be roused, no tragic interest excited, no generous and lofty feeling called into action, where those dark and chilling feelings pervade. He complied with the only terms upon which the muse would impart her favors, and the tragedies of Voltaire displayed the loveliness of Christianity, below indeed what a Christian would feel, but almost beyond what unbelieving genius could conceive. Such was the victory of poetry, when she arrested the apostate while marching onward to the desolation of mankind, when the champion of modern philosophy fell down before the altar she had raised, and breathed forth the incense of an infidel's adoration. When he came, like the disobedient prophet, that he might curse the people of God, and behold, he blessed them altogether. We are well assured that poetry, although sometimes seen in connection with error, even as the sons of God held companionship with the daughters of men, is one of the choicest blessings bequeathed to this imperfect world. She is not the offspring of human invention, for unlike those arts and sciences which were given to man in an elementary state, she sprang, Minerva-like, into existence, perfect in her proportions, mature in her strength, and gorgeous in her panoply. The Christian can trace her divine origin with the utmost certainty and behold with an unclouded vision that she is born of God and baptized with inspiration. She invests all things with an extrinsic glory. She diffuses a new light upon the face of nature. She weans us from the rule of our passions and the dominion of our lusts, and reveals the golden ladder that leads from earth to heaven. We ask but of such that before they finally abjure poetry, they place themselves in a situation to feel its influence. They would not fail soon to acknowledge that they had despised only because they had neglected it. They would exclaim, with a voice of exultation, "We have discovered an ever-living fountain of crystal waters, where angels might wash and be purer."